Number 9. Defeated by a girl. When 31-year-old Cameron Hogg lost a pickup basketball game to his friend 21-year-old Asia Womack, he did not take it well. It happened at a park in Dallas, Texas one day in 2022. The pair argued, and Asia walked to a friend's house nearby to watch football. She was sitting outside with her friend later that day when Cameron's truck pulled up to the property. He allegedly approached Asia and her friend on foot, fired 2 fatal bullets into her chest, and fled the scene. The friend who witnessed the murder chose Cameron from a police lineup, and he was charged with murder. Asia's family and other grief-stricken community members were in disbelief that someone killed her over a sports game. Speaking with Fox 4, the family's pastor, John Daly, speculated that the senseless crime was the result of Cameron becoming embarrassed that a female defeated him in basketball. The young woman's mother, Andrea Womack, described Cameron as a family friend whom Asia had been kind to in the past. To resort to murder was an extreme reaction, regardless of whether Asia was killed over the actual game or the trash talk that she and Cameron exchanged afterward. The case is ongoing. Number 8. Board game blowout. A few days before Christmas in 2021, police were called to an apartment complex in Rogersville, Tennessee. It was a domestic dispute in the early morning hours. Officer Eric Pease later told the Rogersville Review that when he arrived, he could hear 22-year-old Madison Lee Collins screaming at her husband. Pease claimed that he saw her hit another in the nose. Madison's husband said that his wife got upset during a board game and threw a drunk, belligerent tantrum. He accused his wife of flipping over a table and hitting him repeatedly on the side of the head, at which point he got away from her and dialed 911. When Officer Pease tried taking Madison into custody, she allegedly resisted and yelled that she wasn't going to jail. He accused the raging suspect of taking a swing at him and grazing his head and chest. A struggle ensued, but Pease managed to gain control of Madison and arrested her for domestic assault, resisting arrest, and assaulting an officer. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 7. Mother of the Year goes mad. During a baseball game for 12-year-olds in Mississippi in 2022, a woman wearing a Mother of the Year t-shirt began shouting profanities at the umpires. Kiara Nichelle Thomas was kicked out of the game and allegedly waited in the parking lot to confront 10-year veteran umpire Christy Moore. She was accused of punching Moore in the face, leaving the victim with a black eye. Police pulled Thomas over while she was driving home from the game and arrested her for simple assault. She was later released and ultimately paid a $422 fine. In a Facebook post displaying her injuries, Moore called Thomas's behavior out as unacceptable. She pointed to the assault as one of the reasons it's difficult to get sports officials to work children's games. Moore challenged parents who constantly criticize umpires to go out there and do the job themselves. Speaking with local station WLBT, she described the behavior among parents of young athletes as out of control and said that they were making it increasingly difficult for umpires to do their jobs. Now that her personal experience with it had escalated from verbal to physical abuse, Moore decided it was time to raise more awareness about the ongoing problem. At the time, a state bill to make assaulting a referee or umpire a felony had recently failed to pass. Moore hoped that her experience would help encourage lawmakers to reconsider their positions on the matter. Number 6. Fatal family time. Investigators were baffled when 49-year-old Tamara Lee Mason vanished from her Alberta, Minnesota home on Christmas Day in 2010. Her 3 sons, 25-year-old Dylan Clemens, 18-year-old Andrew Cobb, and 17-year-old Jacob Cobb, told police that their mother had stormed out of the house in a fit of anger after they refused to play Yahtzee with her. The family had just gotten home from dinner at a friend's house, and the brothers didn't want to play the board game. 5 months later, an informant told investigators that Tamara's eldest son, Dylan, had said that the youngest brother, Jacob, had strangled their mother to death. Dylan allegedly asked another witness about the best ways to dispose of a body. He initially denied having any involvement in the crime when questioned by police, but eventually admitted that he overheard a struggle and found Jacob strangling Tamara on the floor. The brothers drove her body to a friend's house the next day with plans to burn it, but changed their mind and brought it back to the house, where they kept it in a trash can in the shed. Once the ground had softened up, they buried Tamara's remains in their backyard. Authorities charged Jacob with murder, and they charged Dylan and Andrew with accessory after the fact. Jacob pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. At his sentencing, the judge overseeing the case told Jacob that he was going to spend a lot of time in prison, but a longer time out. He urged the defendant to find another way to deal with people in order to avoid landing back in prison after his release. Dylan received an 8-year sentence for the accessory charge, while Andrew served 22 months. Number 5. Beer pong belligerence. Things suddenly went awry at a house party full of young people in 2013 in North Tonawanda, New York, when a teenager became a sore loser over a beer pong game. After his defeat during the early morning hours, Jordan Wankaski got into a fight with the party's host, Andrew Huffman, and reportedly lost that too. Wankaski allegedly went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and then returned to the room with the 7-inch, 17.8 centimeter blade. He stabbed Huffman twice on the top of the head, once in the back of the head, and once in his upper shoulder near his neck. Witnesses sprang into action and wrestled the knife out of Wankaski's hand. They later told police that they believed the suspect was trying to kill Huffman. Police Captain Thomas Krantz credited the bystanders with saving the victim's life and told the Buffalo News that Huffman would have likely died if the stab wound to his shoulder had been just a few inches toward the front of his neck. Wankaski fled the scene on foot and was quickly apprehended by police. Authorities charged him with second-degree attempted murder, assault, and criminal possession of a weapon. As part of a plea deal, he pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of attempted second-degree assault, which carries a maximum prison term of 4 years. The judge temporarily sentenced Wankaski to probation, with plans to impose a definitive sentence at a later date. At the hearing, he offered a tearful apology and said that he had quit drinking and that he was glad Huffman survived. Number 4. Parents post-game brawl. Tensions became heated at a youth football game in Hogansville, Georgia one day in 2022. It happened when a disgruntled mother confronted a recreation official for not letting her son play. He reportedly said that the boy was kept on the bench because he had missed several practices and because his parents hadn't paid the required fees for his participation. Soon after that, the conversation came to blows, and surrounding adults were quick to jump in the fray. Hogansville officers responded to the scene during the fight, which was so chaotic and involved so many people that they had to call for backup from neighboring police departments. Even as law enforcement appeared, the violence continued, with the brawl eventually spilling over into the parking lot. Authorities charged a young woman named Markeisha Reeves, who was tasered because she allegedly wouldn't stop fighting. 38-year-old Panika Tigner was also charged in connection with the incident, and warrants were later issued for 3 other people. In the squabble's aftermath, Hogansville Police Chief Jeffrey Shepard made it clear that this type of behavior would not be tolerated at future events. He announced plans to step up the police presence at future youth sports games and to issue criminal trespassing charges against anyone who tries to stop officers from attending games or using the parking lot. Number 3. Bingo Hall double murder. The atmosphere suddenly turned chaotic one evening in 2019 during what started out as a routine night at the Whack-A-Mole Bingo Hall in Horry County, South Carolina. Shots rang out inside the packed bingo hall during what turned out to be a robbery gone wrong. Several brave civilians shot at and chased after the gunman, who managed to escape from the scene. The hall's owner, 73-year-old Stephen Johnson Sr., and his 46-year-old son, Sparky Johnson Jr., were fatally shot. Several days after the tragedy, authorities charged 29-year-old Derek Rivera with murder, armed robbery, possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, and possession of a weapon by a convicted felon. A second suspect, 40-year-old Bradford Britton, faced charges for murder and robbery. Prosecutors accused Rivera of persuading Britton to drive him to the bingo hall to carry out the crime, unaware of his friend's plan. The defense claimed the opposite, that Britton was the mastermind and the shooter, and that he purposely left behind evidence containing Rivera's DNA in a bid to set him up. But Rivera's attorneys failed to convince the jury that he was the less culpable party. He was convicted of murder and armed robbery and received 2 life sentences plus 30 years without the possibility of parole. Britton lied to police several times during questioning, but prosecutors nevertheless stood by their claims that he wasn't the shooter. He pleaded guilty to reduced charges of armed robbery and accessory after the fact. Number 2. Contentious chess match. David Christian and his neighbor Michael Stewart became embroiled in an intense chess game at one of the men's homes in Iowa City, Iowa in 2008. They were also drinking heavily, and tempers flared as they began arguing over the game. At some point, the disagreement became physical. Stewart slapped Christian, who responded by putting Stewart's neck between his legs and squeezing until the victim became unresponsive. According to court records, Christian told police he tried performing CPR on his friend before rushing over to a neighbor and having them call 911. Authorities initially charged Christian with second-degree murder and public intoxication. If convicted, he could face a 50-year prison sentence, but he pleaded guilty to a reduced voluntary manslaughter charge and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Shortly after the incident, neighbor Jay Scheidt was among many community members who were shocked by the ordeal. He told the Daily Iowan that he knew Stewart and Christian as heavy drinkers, but that they were quiet people who played games together often and enjoyed discussing politics and music with each other. Scheidt, like many others, was especially surprised because of how close the two friends were. He suggested that alcohol was to blame for the deadly fight. Number 1. Gaming addiction turns deadly. After finding her son dead in his Wisconsin apartment in 2002, Liz Woolley was immediately convinced that his addiction to a computer game caused him to take his own life. 21-year-old Sean Woolley was found slumped over at his computer with the game EverQuest on the screen. Liz told CBS anchor Susan Spencer that Sean became wholly consumed by the game, to the point where he couldn't get up and walk away from it. His emotional state depended entirely on how the game was going, leading Liz to believe that Sean killed himself after something bad happened during EverQuest. After realizing how bad her son's addiction was, Liz tried to talk some sense into Sean, reminding him that what went on in the game wasn't part of the real world. The characters weren't real people, and the events didn't really happen. But nothing she said could make Sean feel less angry, betrayed, and upset whenever he had a disappointing gaming session. He had such a difficult time pulling himself away from EverQuest that he stopped working, stopped seeing his family, quit cleaning his apartment, and turned visitors away. Sony Online CEO John Smedley adamantly denied that EverQuest was responsible for Sean's tragic death. He said there was no reason to believe that the game, which he described as a form of entertainment, had any influence on the young man's fatal decision. Smedley said it was nonsense to call EverQuest addictive, and that people have a responsibility to know when they've exceeded their limit with it. But Liz wasn't the only person who believed EverQuest was dangerous and that it psychologically trapped its users so they felt like they couldn't quit. Following her son's death, she connected with dozens of other distraught relatives of gamers who showed telltale signs of addiction and who blamed EverQuest for ruining their lives. Sony refused to grant Liz's wish for a warning label to come with the game, but the company did implement a timer feature that allowed users to set their own limits. In the years since, the growing problem of gaming addiction has gained more validity in the public eye and among health experts. The World Health Organization began recognizing it as a disease in 2018, and it's being taken far more seriously than it was 20 years ago, especially now that doctors are seeing the earliest signs of gaming addiction in children as young as 8 years old. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be falsely accused of cheating during a serious game with friends, or have a friend totally overreact and stop talking to you because you undeniably beat them in a game, fair and square? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.